reality is that, again, my great-grandfather went from Stalingrad to liberate Europe, and my great-grandmother lived through Holodomor, genocide by hunger. If they survive, if they survived that, I can survive this.
Now, let's return to that top story where fighting continues in Ukraine between invading Russian forces and the Ukrainian army and citizens. The massive column of Russian armoured vehicles that had been at a standstill north of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has dispersed into towns and countryside close to the capital, raising fears that the city could soon be encircled. In the east of the country, the strategic eastern city of Dnipro has come under fire for the first time in the war. Tim Marshall is a foreign affairs analyst and joins me on the line now. Good evening to you, Tim.
Hello, Cathy.
So the third week of the invasion, it does feel as if we're entering a new phase, doesn't it? What's your assessment of what's going on?
Yep, they're going to grind them down. They didn't have the element of surprise because they'd built up for such a long time. They had assumed, as you said in the introduction, a lightning strike, and it is because of the resistance, but also it does appear their ineptitude, about which apparently Putin is absolutely raging mad back in Moscow. But the Russians have a long tradition of simply pounding away, putting their young men through the meat grinder and then pounding away, and that's what they're doing. These satellite images, they come from this US company called Maxar Technologies. And they've tracked this dispersal. And the convoy is now in at least 5 different positions. And a lot of it is tanks, but there's also a lot of these artillery pieces, towed artillery pieces. And they have moved into potential firing positions onto Kiev from a number of different directions, which of course will thin out the defensive positions of the Ukrainians.
Right.
So it does look like we are closer to the bombardment of the city. And also this widening is interesting. Going from Dnipro, or Dnipro as we pronounce it, it's the 4th largest city in the country. It's nicknamed Rocket City because of this technology that you can have has built huge space workforces there. And I assume that the Russians will like it because of that technology, but it just seems to have been a one-off strike into an industrial area left alone again. That's a little bit puzzling. And the two other things that
Tim, I'm sorry to stop you.
Sorry, go ahead.
The line is really bad, so I think we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you very much for offering your thoughts on that. Tim Marshall, foreign affairs analyst there, and I'm sorry about the quality of the line. I was going to go on to ask him about chemical weapons and reports on that, but we have other guests to talk to about that, including now in Ukraine, Ukrainian MP Sviatoslav Yurash, who is Ukraine's youngest member of parliament. He spent yesterday afternoon bringing humanitarian help to the front lines in Irpin, and he joins us now from Kyiv. Good evening to you, Sviatoslav.
Good evening, Cathy.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I know things are incredibly difficult for you there. I wanted to ask you about what you did yesterday in Irpin first, delivering aid to the front line. Tell us, how desperate is the situation there?
Extremely so. I mean, the reality is that they have no water, they have no electricity, they have no connection, no cell connection. So the fact of the matter is they cannot really get through and explain their plight to the world and to Ukraine. So basically, I was bringing some food and I found people who are in desperate need of everything basic that was there just 2 weeks ago. And because of Russian invasion, everything disappeared. And this city, which was quite thriving, being close to the capital and being one of the key points on the way from the western border to Kyiv, is now in desperate state, being shelled all the time, attacked all the time, and having battles in the middle of the city every day.
You know, the people in Britain and across the world have been so impressed with the bravery of the Ukrainian people and indeed, you know, politicians such as yourself. I suppose it must be incredibly worrying to hear the latest reports as a suggestion that, you know, Belarus might attack tonight on Russia's side. How concerning is that for you?
Reality is Belarus already has been a staging ground for the Russian attack. I mean, the reality north of Kiev has been created by the fact that Belarus allowed the Russian troops move through their border into the Chernobyl exclusionary zone and take this nuclear power station hostage, and now cause the worry to hold the world, essentially disrupting their energy supply to the power station, causing possible nuclear accidents that can be devastating to the world. But the fact of the matter is, Belarusian entry to the war is no news to us. Lukashenko has been trying to push at his military to come on in, and as far as Belarusian military, they have different opinions. I've heard that the chief of staff of Belarusian armed forces has resigned in the last couple of days. Again, there is no desire on part of Belarus to fight against Ukraine. We are brotherly nations, and for us, that idea is unacceptable, and we'll see that if Lukashenko pushes his people to attack Ukraine.
I should just say on the issue of Chernobyl, the news that we have at the moment from the international nuclear authorities is that the situation is safe there, but I completely understand your concerns. But I've just wondered, just stepping back a bit, because it hasn't gone as Russia planned it, and we've seen that with the military operation. And I was saying, people have been so impressed with your bravery. But do you fear, when you see the Russian attack widening and you see that Belarus is stepping up its involvement potentially, do you worry that Putin will eventually get what he wants, which is clearly the whole of your country?
Putin's main mistake is believing his own propaganda. He was expecting Ukrainians to welcome his open arms and throwing flowers at his soldiers. The opposite does happen. People went to the streets in cities he occupied to showcase that they don't want Russia there, that they want Ukraine to continue as a state, as a nation, as a sovereign, independent power. They have volunteered en masse, and now, for example, Kiev has been preparing in every single way to repel whatever Russian throw at us. And the reality is that's the same response that in all the major cities we are seeing to Russian invasion.
But does anything shake your determination to resist? For example, the prospect of a potential chemical weapons attack from Russia, does that make you pause?
In the 20th century, the most horrible century of all for our nation, we survived through the First World War, Russian Civil War, communist experiments, genocide by hunger, by Stalin, Holodomor, Second World War, Holocaust, collectivization, gulags, and much, much else. If my ancestors survived that, we can survive through this. If we survive Stalin, we can survive Putin.
It's incredible to hear your fortitude. You've asked repeatedly for NATO to impose a no-fly zone over your country to protect you. If they continue to resist doing that, what do you fear the consequences will be?
The consequences will be what you see every single day on your TVs. That is devastation, humanitarian catastrophe, children dead, civilians dead, residential buildings hit. Russia doesn't truly have a winning advantage in the air, but has overwhelming numbers in the air. And it can strike at every part of Ukraine. Today has started with the fact that Russian rockets hit every part of my country, from the west of my country to the east of my country. And it's the biggest country in Europe we're speaking about. So the Russians are clearly causing terror with the air advantage that they have. For us, controlling the skies is evening the odds. But again, for us, we asked for means to do it ourselves if the NATO is not willing to come on in.
So if NATO, do you sort of sympathise with NATO wanting to resist becoming embroiled in the war themselves, out of a fear that this could escalate to a nuclear confrontation? Do you have any sympathy with that?
NATO members have already shot down Russian planes, and this was, for example, during the crisis in Syria, and there was no Third World War. The reality is, Russia needs to see the Western world is not willing to throw us out and to allow this catastrophe to continue. So the point is here just to show the fact that the Western world cares in a real way and gives our armies, gives our people a fighting chance.
Do you see any way out of this barbaric conflict?
Putin seems very clearly determined to destroy my country. He spent an hour-long speech a week before the invasion, talking exactly about this matter and his desire to destroy my nation. The point is that negotiations that are happening, it's that they are producing possibilities essentially for Putin to try and get what he wants without the war. we aren't going to lay down, let Putin do what he wants. We will fight till the bitter end. So the point is, there's only one person who's in between us and getting the peace here.
Do you think the Russian people might get the message, get the real news about what's going on and rise up against Putin?
I hope so. I hope in the minds of many in Russia, there are wheels turning as far as seeing their POWs and other people in Ukraine that don't understand. The soldiers here in Ukraine don't understand why they are in Ukraine. The prisoners of war we capture tell us that much. The reality is that basically that's why Putin is shutting off Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and everything else in Russia, not to allow those images, the truth of what's happening in Ukraine, to come to his people. And he destroyed every single independent media in Russia, causing basically a blackout for his people. But again, Russian people have a choice to make here, and I hope they'll make the right one.
Sviatoslav, what will you do tonight and tomorrow?
Well, tonight, actually, I am trying to organize foreign volunteers, some of them from Britain, that came here to Ukraine to help us in this fight. And the point is to try and get them organized, sorted, and prepared for battle. They are very eager to join the fight, and they will be joining in the coming days. But there are many more nations here that came together to see the images on their TVs. They see the reality of what different Ukrainians tell them, and they want to help us win this. So again, this tonight is about seeing the fact that the world is not ambivalent, especially citizens of that world of ours.
The volunteers, are they trained as soldiers, the ones from Britain?
The ones that we have here, yes, these are people that have went through different conflicts and are willing to put those skills of theirs to use in defending Ukraine and the national world order in the process.
And Sviatoslav, you look very composed, but are you scared?
Well, the reality is that, again, my great-grandfather went from Stalingrad to liberate Europe, and my great-grandmother lived through Holodomor, genocide by hunger. If they survived that, I can survive this.
Sviatoslav Yurash, thank you so much for joining us, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.